The ache for home lives in all of us. The safe place where we can go as we are and not be questioned. Maya Angelou. Bending, Not Breaking. The live action episodes. Episode 3. Omashu. And we are back with another episode of Bending Not Breaking. I'm Sunshine.
I'm Ben.
And what a time to be alive.
What a time. It's April.
It's April at the time of this recording in the year of our Lord 2024.
Yeah, we're doing great. You know, it's fine. Everything's fine.
Everything's fine.
I'm not dying.
Everything
because
is
I haven't
not
done
fine.
My taxes and they're due tomorrow.
They're due tomorrow for you.
For me.
I've
Yeah.
already
I should have done them months ago.
Yeah.
But I didn't. And it's also conveniently when everything else is due. So, you know, we're going to read an entire book and write a paper on it by Tuesday.
Well, your poor time management is not our lens this week.
We're going to write a whole research paper and then present on it on Wednesday. And then, yeah, it's going to be great. We're fine.
We're fine.
I'll survive.
You sound very secure.
Yep. Okay.
You're excited about all the things that are coming to fruition at the same time for you.
Yeah, all at the same time.
The live action episodes
Omashu.
have been out for a little bit, like a couple months at this point.
Yeah, what did they came out? February 20-something?
So we may be a little late to the game because I feel like I'm not hearing anyone talk about the show anymore.
I mean, they just released that they were doing seasons 2 and 3 already, so, but that was the last, like, big thing I heard.
So clearly it was popular enough
Yeah.
to do that.
Yeah, for sure.
And so we're excited to talk about it.
Yeah, we're talking about it.
The
Not
ache
right now, though.
for home lives in all of us. The safe place where we can go as we are and not be questioned. We're talking about security today.
Yeah.
That's
a lot
the
of times
lens.
people feel, safe and secure in their version and idea of what home is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Their version and idea of what home is or should be.
Yeah, or could be, That's the thing. So, security, thinking about often related to safety, right? Feeling secure, of course, the opposite being like insecurity, not feeling secure. And so that's kind of encompassing all kinds of things, physical, emotional, spiritual, all the things. So,
The state of being free from danger or threat.
yeah, that seems nice. I'd like that.
Well, yeah. What's this really interesting? There has to be a balance, which has been the overarching theme of Avatar
Did you say balance?
and our show.
The word?
But this weird juxtaposition between people should feel safe,
Yeah.
people deserve to feel safe,
For sure.
and when does that get weaponized into a justification for unsafe actions towards others for your own safety?
Yeah, I think people will do things that because it has the, people think that doing something harmful towards another will bring more security to you, and therefore it is worth doing, right? And so the justification of putting other people in insecure spots in order to make you more secure is a really interesting situation to be in.
And is it valid at some point?
I don't know. It's a good question. I think that depending on all the ethicists you talk to, some would say that the means do not
Ever justify the ends. Yeah.
And then sometimes people will say that the ends are the means, right? And so if you want a secure place for all, then you have to continuously, through your means, enact security, right? And so always making sure that everyone feels safe is the only way to get to a point where you get a safe and secure end. And some people say you need to have insecurity to get to a secure end. And so it's an interesting question. Qualms, is war necessary becomes the question here. Is fighting necessary? Is conflict necessary? And that's where it starts to get interesting, because conflict, I think, is necessary, but the conflict where people feel unsafe, like the kinds of conflict, right? Like violence, I don't think is necessary, whereas conflict, I do think is necessary.
There's a difference between being uncomfy and being unsafe.
Yeah.
And so, like, we've had conversations in the past around having uncomfortable conversations with people for the sake of accountability or creating security. Like, there may be times where you need to feel uncomfortable to learn.
Yep.
And this is an uncomfortable conversation. And then there are times where it's like, oh, no, I'm enacting violence to make you feel unsafe is very different.
Well, and how do we begin to do a better job of discerning the difference between discomfort and a lack of safety?
Correct.
Right? Because I think for those of us that experience more privilege, it is our responsibility to better interpret that than we are. Right? Because oftentimes what we hear, for instance, regarding like a white supremacist lens is a lot of times white people feel very unsafe because of their discomfort, because they don't experience discomfort a lot. Right?
Yeah, the more privilege you have, the more likely you are going to be in the place of discomfort than actual lack of safety.
Correct. Yeah.
Every layer of privilege you have is a layer of safety.
Yeah.
Like is a barrier to the unsafe.
Yeah, and I think the problem is we just see that. We don't always have the awareness to experience that as safety, right? We experience it as normal. We experience it as what we have always had, and that's the baseline. And of course me else has it, when that's just not true.
It's the equivalent of I have 8 fences between me and the world around me. And that could be every layer of privilege I have.
Yeah.
And the moment one of those fences is knocked down, I'm unsafe now.
Yeah.
Because you're taking down this one fence, which you could be taking down multiple fences. If you can take down one, you can take down all of them.
Yeah.
It's just flawed
It's flawed
logic, especially in the sense of there are people who have to maneuver life without any fences or without a home, right?
Yeah.
Like they don't even
Yeah.
they don't even have the home. It's just
Or the land
for the
on.
fence.
Yeah.
And so I think that when you're used to having 8 fences and one gets knocked down, it feels like an attack on something you deserve to have.
Metaphorically speaking.
And it's just not the case. It's same with like setting boundaries, right?
Exactly.
I'm setting a boundary, which I'm taking something that you thought that you deserved, my time, my energy, my feelings on a certain matter, and I'm saying you are no longer able to obtain that, even though it was never yours to like have. It's mine to give. It still feels like I'm taking something away from you.
Yeah, and I think it's important we remember that this is not just on a physical level, right? This is physical, emotional, spiritual, like mental, everything. And so like bringing in those kinds of boundaries is just as important as these like physical, metaphorical fences. So I think that's important. Yeah.
Ben, you got 30 seconds on the clock.
It's my turn?
It is your turn.
No.
30-second recap.
I'm pretty sure it's your
and
turn.
And away we
go. Okay, so there's like, assassination attempt, and then it goes wrong, and then they get burned alive, and then Katara is bendy, and Aang sees flying people over Omashu, and they go and meet Jet, and sneak in, and get bombed, and meet the Mechanist, and then betrayal, Jet, and then freedom fighters, and then Sokka nerds out, and then Katara and Jet get close, and then Teo and Aang figure stuff out, and then Jet
10
and
seconds.
Sai. Is it Jet or Sai? Oh my god, they're both bad. Oh my god, but they're not. And then Zuko fights Aang, and then they're bombs, and then Katara saves the day, and then Zuko escapes, and then that's really it. That's it. That just walks out of the Omashu.
That's it.
Nailed it.
There's characters and there's things that happen with those characters, and I'm done.
Yeah,
Assassination attempt.
It's an hour. There's a lot going on. And there wasn't as much fighting as you get to always get away with.
It's true. There's a little fighting.
Yeah, but I skipped that part.
Yeah, I mean, that was actually, I appreciate the hand-to-hand combat. That was
a neat scene.
There's a way to go, oh, what happens if they're not allowed to bend?
Yeah.
And that was...
Turns out.
Fun.
They have some skills. All right. We're talking about security. That's our
security.
Lens. What's a moment of security or lack thereof you noticed in the episode?
Yeah, so let's just start with the very first one that you lifted up. Ooh, an assassination attempt.
Ooh, assassination.
The idea... So there's a couple things, right?
Yikes.
So when we talk about fascism itself, the idea of nationalism is a big part of that,
Yep.
right? And that comes from an us versus them mentality.
Yep.
So it's building this idea around security needing to be important to maintain the us versus them.
Yeah.
They are unsafe. We are safe.
Yep.
So us versus them. And it's a big talking point a lot of times, right? Like, we hear it all the time. We've got to keep ourselves safe on the borders. We got to do all these things. We've got to have the most military power in the world because of security. And it's us versus them. And so you get this idea from Ozai at the very beginning. You mean unity?
Yeah.
You mean safety?
Yeah. Exactly.
But at what cost is the question that gets asked, right? But at what cost is all of that worth it? When you have to have atrocities towards other people.
Well, and I think
at what cost?
The weight, I think, is really interesting because I think when you watch this, you get the sense that Ozai believes what he's saying, right? You mean unity? This is what I have been working towards. This, we have been, toiling, blah 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 blah. And so the idea that he truly believes that what he is doing is worth the cost. And so what happens in genocidal mindsets is that people become things, and therefore you can destroy them without the threat of, your moral dignity being in question.
Right.
And so what he's able to do is torch these people, these, insurrectionists? In
rebellion.
Yeah, these rebels, and he's able to torch them without a second thought, right? And it's like, it gives me the vibes of like playing with your food, where, let me talk to you for a little bit and hear what you have to say, and then I'm going to torch you alive at the worst possible moment.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just this really interesting thing that's happening in terms of messaging, and like, who is that message for? If he knows he's gonna take them out, why is the parading and the peacocking happening? Is it for Azula? Is it for his soldiers that are watching this? Like, I don't know. Like, I don't know what message this is and who it is to. Does that make sense as a question?
And the idea, if you're willing to hurt your own,
exactly.
What type of, if you're creating this us versus them mentality, and you're willing to hurt the us.
Yeah.
But it's so easy to be like, well, you're actually them, right? You're not actually us, even though you are us. And you're not actually. It's easy to kind of create that when you dehumanize, when you don't see the humanity. It's easy to create that delineation of like, you're not us. You're not Fire Nation. You're not real people.
Well, and I think what that does is it hyperbolizes. That's probably the wrong word. Emphasizes the need to belong, because as soon as you don't, you get torched, literally, right? And so to all of the soldiers in the room and to Azula, what you see is that even though you're Fire Nation, right? And these people were Fire Nation. This is the tyranny of the Fire Nation, right? Even though you are a part of this, as soon as you do anything to go against it, you're worthless.
To put real life versions of this up, it's anytime you see a congressperson right now get confronted with the idea of genocide happening in Palestine, and the moment you say, hey, isn't it bad to kill innocent children and families and bomb hospitals, and a congressperson's response is, oh, so you're a Hamas sympathizer.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're like, no, I'm not saying that like killing people is wrong, is what I'm saying. So I'm not saying that one person killing another is correct, but I'm saying that we can be doing better. You're a Hamas. You support terrorism. Well, you support this idea, this idea that like that you have to be supporting the bad.
Yeah.
If you're against us, and that's so dumb.
And we're skipping to next episode just for this one line, but this is the exact conversation Jet has with Katara in the next episode, right? If you're not with us,
you're against me.
Us, right?
You were the chosen one, Anakin.
But like, it's the same thing as what we're seeing being built in this episode with Jet is, I'm going to, lure you in to my mindset and I'm going to use language just like in the OG of dehumanizing language. We know how to take out the garbage, right?
Yep.
And calling Fire Nation people, human beings, garbage is one step towards like treating them in such a way that enables you to bomb innocent people, right? And so it's just a really interesting situation. There's a lot of like rough stuff going on.
Well, and that's some of the stuff that comes up with Jet as well. So, first, before we go on too far, even with that same assassination attempt, the question gets raised, is killing Ozai
going to solve the problem?
Solving the problem, right? Does that bring security? Like, are the rebels, engaging in a way that is also going to be helpful? And I don't know. Like, I don't know the answer
that's
because
the thing is
there's
I don't have a good answer for that.
Because clearly they're the oppressed in that situation, and so it does taking out the oppressor. Is that possibly a way to help? And it's kind of this difference between manufactured harm or manufactured threats versus real ones.
Yeah. And
so the answer still gets kind of muddy because this isn't the rebels are just as bad as Ozai. They're not.
Yeah.
They're not. And the ethical question can still be raised: was an assassination attempt the best way to move forward? But it may be the only tool they knew how.
And that's the thing, right? I think what's so hard about this is it's the same thing when we have, riots in the street and like people are like, couldn't they have done it a better way? I'm like, the better way doesn't work with you because you don't hear it.
Yeah, every time, every way that you ask somebody to protest, they have done, and you ignored them. And so finally, you can't ignore it. People blocking a highway, and then it's like, oh well, that's not going to win anyone to their side.
Can't get to work.
Well, now I can't ignore it. I'm annoyed by it, and it's like that's the point, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's also, even in that situation, a lot of times people think that that's an individual attack. You're attacking me, the person who's trying to get to work.
Why does that bother me?
And the reality is like, no, we're attacking all the systems that now you can't participate in by stopping you from getting there. Yeah. It's not a personal attack on you. It's a personal attack. It's an attack on the system. It's a disruption of the system in those moments.
Well, and it's hard because to be honest, there have been times where I thought the world would be a better place if certain people didn't exist. Right?
Sure.
And so I freely admit to that. It doesn't mean I'm going to act on it, but there have been times where I'm like, I think the world would be better if this person didn't exist. If this person who was the centerpiece for X, Y, and Z didn't exist, the world would have been a better place. The problem is I don't know enough. Right? And I can think that, but I know that I'm one person and I'm one opinion and I just don't know. And so there's so much strong, intense beliefs that transfers to what to me feels like really a cocky, egotistical mindset, thinking that you are so right that someone deserves to die because of your thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's not healthy. It's not good, even if you're right. I think this is part of my theology training coming into play, but I think that does just as much harm to your own mental and emotional security. I think it puts yourself, and if you believe in a soul or your inner psyche or whatever guides you in terms of, that voice inside your head, your conscience, whatever that language is for you, I think that takes a hit. We call that moral injury. And I think that takes a hit when you start thinking that way.
Well, and there are things that we can point to, individuals we can point to in history that actively made things worse for the next few generations. Reagan.
Yep.
Right,
Hitler.
but it's also to recognize that Reagan wasn't by himself.
Oh gosh,
right.
That's
a whole administration that's working towards those things. And
you got to think that he's often it wasn't really Reagan. He was the puppet through which these organizations puppet mastered him into creating these things.
Not to take away his own accountability in that process,
right?
But it's a bigger system than just the face of it.
Yeah.
And so I don't know what that looks like. And that's the tough part about this. So again, because the question that then pops up as we're also talking about Jet and as we're also talking about the people of Omashu is, when is a threat manufactured versus when is a threat real, and how do we see that coming? How do we see that?
That's hard.
And then how do we navigate it?
Yeah.
And that is a whole lot more work that we can navigate in a 1 hour podcast.
Yeah.
But I think that is the question, that if we can find a takeaway home, and I think, for us, the answer's always lied in like community, right? Like, it was our decisions being made in community is the conversation, but it's easy to rally up. Like, there are whole political factions that have been rallied up in a community.
Well, exactly. A community
based
of
off of manufactured threat.
Yeah, a community of who, right? Because if you're only recruiting like-minded people, right? And that begs the question of, like, does everyone deserve a seat at the table, right? There are some people where I'm like, no, at this table, you don't deserve a seat. But also
because of what the table is trying to accomplish.
Because of what the table is trying to, exactly. But then it goes exactly to what you're saying. When you only form a community of people with like-minded thoughts, you're missing something, right? And so really being intentional about the kinds of things you're willing to not have at the table is really important, because you don't want to not... You have to have some disagreement. You have to have people who are... giving you different ways of thinking about it. But that doesn't mean you have people that actively want other people to die at the table. So it's just like this really hard line, right? It's not an easy concept. It's so hard.
It's tough, because when we think about what is security, what does security look like?
Yeah.
And security looks like potentially having a shelter that the Fire Nation can't get to.
Yeah.
Right.
Or a city, perhaps, like Omashu.
Or where like you can be there. I think about the freedom fighters and like, yeah, we have this cool thing, and there's a community there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it seems like when they're acting within what makes us feel safe and belonging, and like, where's this place coming from? Like, we want to take care of people who have been harmed.
Yeah.
There's really beautiful moments of what security can look like. Having pipsqueak around, like showing, hey, I care about you.
Yeah.
Wow, what a secure, like that feels like security.
Mm-hmm.
But I also wonder, like, in the lens too, is the old quote, a ship is safe in the harbor.
Yeah.
But is that what ships are meant to do? And as much as I am annoyed by nautical puns or memes or metaphors, there is a little bit of that too. Like, if you're creating such a secure you can go live in a bunker. Like, you can go create like a storm shelter with all the supplies you need for the next 60 years and live there.
Yeah.
But like,
is that a fulfilling life? Well, the problem is too, like, let's be honest, a ship is not always safe in the harbor, right?
You just think it is.
You just think it is, right? Any sort of storm can be, like, a harbor can be very bad for a ship. And so it's like one of those things where it depends on the conditions as well. And so, like, yeah, I think that all of these, when you extend the metaphor far enough, they will break. And that's the point, is when you apply the right kinds of pressure to any situation, the rules change and shift. And that's what makes the world so hard, is that nothing is absolute. And, absolutes and nevers break. And that's hard, because people want to feel that security around the absolutes and the nevers.
Yeah. As we're getting back into the show, there's also this interesting moment when we're talking about, like, is it sometimes okay to pull down barriers? Is Zuko letting Zhao help?
That's an interesting
line.
Yeah.
Is like letting Zhao, because it's this interesting place where, like, Zhao doesn't really like seem like he's just absolutely out to get Zuko.
Yeah,
like,
honestly,
it seems like he's like trying, like, genuinely, like, hey, no, like, if you let me do this, like, you will also have a better attempt at catching the Avatar. Now, I may have some like side motivations and benefits from it, but like, he's not wrong. Like, Zuko helping, like, allowing one or two more people into the circle allowed them to figure out that Aang is in Omashu.
Yeah.
And so that's an interesting concept of, like, again, when are you kind of over secure and not accepting help? And granted, this isn't the perfect metaphor because, it's about continuing mass extinction and
Yeah.
imperialism. But in scenes where, like, how often do we hold back or not ask for help? Because either one, we think it's our burden to hold
All the
on to,
time.
or we're protecting our own emotions or feelings, and we don't want other people to be involved because if you get involved, then you may do it differently than I want to, and that may like strain our friendship. But the reality is like, I need help.
Yeah.
And then we don't ask for it, and it's for the sake of either our security or our projected, like, I'm making sure that you as an outsider have security from me and my actions, and so we just block connection.
Yeah. Well, and thinking about what's at stake for each of these people. Like, what's at stake for Zhao is a promotion, right? That's what it seems like he's heading
even
for.
Ozai says in the beginning of the episode, like, he's a nobody.
Yeah. And so it seems like Zhao is just trying to get his claim to fame. He's trying to get his 15 minutes. And for Zuko, it's his, like, in the way that this show frames it, it's his chance at the throne, right? This is his livelihood,
his return to
his return home, honor, like, yeah. Which, where's all the honor quotes? I'm just saying. But it seems as though the stakes are much higher for Zuko, which means he is feeling a lot more like everything feels more risky because the stakes are so high. Whereas for Zhao, the stakes don't feel as high, and so he's willing to, bend a little bit more and bring more people in. And I think that's part of it. Like, when we are feeling more risky, we are often going to be more averse to taking those risks, right? And so our security, manufactured or perceived, or whatever word makes the most sense there, probably perceived, perceived security at risk means you're gonna take less risk, right? And so I think that's important to realize, because Zuko is so insecure and he only wants him to know about this, and Iroh maybe, but like, if he could choose, it would just be him. Like,
right. Well, and Iroh's that trusted source. At this point, Iroh's 3 years of Iroh being there, Iroh's a trusted source.
Yeah.
Zhao is not.
Yeah. Well, it's hard because he even, like, it's clear to Zuko that he has other motives. I think it seems clear that he has other motives. And so it's this political maneuvering of, yes, I know you are in the know and I have to include you now, but how do I include you as little as possible? But I think that's what's a little hard is, would it have gone better for Zuko if he would be willing to open his doors a little wider, so to speak?
Well, already, if he was at least kinder, right? I love how we see this little moment of him grappling with I'm going outside of the law to try to capture the Avatar while still trying to maintain the law and order on his own ship.
Yeah.
Because you get this really unique perspective of, like,
we're still Fire Nation.
Well, because he was just sitting there. Yeah. Like, how dare he gossip about this officer? He's like, you don't even like that officer. He's like, well, that's besides the point. We're Fire Nation and there are rules. And it's like, you are currently breaking those rules.
Yep.
Like, you're currently enacting outside of what you've been told to do from the Fire Nation.
Yeah.
And so it's an interesting thing of, like, trying to maintain security within everything else, even if you're like, but I'm going to maneuver it a little bit. Go ahead.
I was going to say, can we talk about walls?
Let's talk about... Omashu has a giant wall.
Yeah.
It's a big one.
And a giant bridge seems like the only entrance to it, right?
It would seem.
Except for, like, these tunnels. But...
bedroomals.
Yeah, the interesting point for me is the checkpoint to get in, right, is a clear attempt at maintaining security for the city. And yet, what we see throughout the episode is that there are spies throughout the city. It's clearly not working in the way that it's being intended, right? Bombings everywhere. The immediate allowance of Katara and Aang and Sokka into the city is a display of how ineffective the checkpoint is, right? They rolled a 12 on deception here.
Not even. Like a 7.
Yeah, they rolled.
It was like a 7.
Yeah.
And you're going to wear a cloak.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
And Sokka, you're just not going to talk.
Yeah. And so it's just interesting, right? So they get in, and that is exactly the point, is that this is perceived security for the city, right? And so I guess my question is, I don't see a better way, because this is not my expertise, but it doesn't feel like this is effective. It doesn't feel like this makes sense, right? So I don't know. I guess I'm just curious, like, is this secure?
Well, I think sometimes it's optics. Like it's the optics of like we're trying to make things feel secure.
So true.
Regardless,
TSA.
That's what TSA is, right?
Yep.
That's why they say that TSA like actually doesn't stop majority of new ways to cause harm.
Yeah.
It stops the old ways we have found out about, maybe. And that's why it's different for every airport you go into. It's like shoes on, shoes off.
Yep.
Computer out of the bag. Computer can stay in the bag.
Yep.
Pull all your liquid items out of your carry-on bag. Leave them in your carry-on bag. Like, there's different rules, and I honestly think it's just dependent on like how much time do we have to get through each person is the dependent reason. I don't know. I don't work for TSA. But there's been studies that have essentially said, like, it's optics.
Yeah.
It's the feeling of safety that can provide safety. And sometimes the feeling of safety can also stop people from, like, making places unsafe if they feel like there is something that could stop them.
If they feel they're being watched.
If they feel they're being watched, if they feel like they're going to get caught, they won't even attempt. And so I think there's a little bit of that. Like, there's a giant wall and there's a bridge. And so if you don't know any other way, that probably is stopping you from going.
This is reminding me of super aside. My dad was in the airport and he made a batch of special brownies, and he was getting on the plane to go to another country, and he read a sign before he got on the plane that if you're caught with any of the following, you will be subject to death. And he immediately went to the bathroom and threw them in the trash can. And it was so, like, in a way, it kind of worked.
But if he would have just put it in his checked bags, it probably would have been fine.
Well, he got through security.
Like,
The security wasn't the problem. It was the sign afterwards that was like, okay, like, get on this plane and get caught and potential death.
Yeah. And so, sometimes I think that, and sometimes here's where I'm at, is the visual cues that make a place feel safe are important. When we look at
who though?
To those who need to feel safe sometimes, I think. Right? There are visual markers that can show that this may be a safer place for some people.
Yeah.
Right? I am more inclined, if there's bars hanging pride flags outside the window, I'm probably more inclined to feel
the signal of safety.
A signal of safety. Now, that doesn't mean that it is actually safe.
Yeah.
Or that those people are doing the actual work to create that safe space.
Yep.
But the signal itself at least creates a little bit of, these individuals might be creating a safer space than if I walk to a bar that's got a Confederate flag.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Like, safe to who? Because if you see a Confederate flag, that might mean and signal safety for some people, right? And so those are, but to me, I'm like, I don't want to go there. That seems like an unsafe place.
And so I think optics can be used to kind of create the, like, who is welcome and who is not.
Exactly. Yeah.
And who is this secure for? And is it enough to keep folks out? For good and for bad.
Yeah, I'm thinking of there's so much research on the optics of security that is really fascinating that we could probably do a deeper dive into, but alas.
Well, we lead a lot of safe zone trainings, and the common question we get is, do I get to throw this sticker on my business now because I've gone through this training?
Yeah.
To which our response is, no.
Yeah.
Like, no, you don't get to put a sticker on your window that says, I'm a safe place to be, because
you can say you took this training.
You can say, but, like, you have to do all the work inside of that to actually create the safe space.
Well, and
part of that can be hanging up some imagery.
Yeah.
Or, like, but I'm not giving you a certificate calling you a safe person or place.
And that's the difference, though, is when we've had this conversation before, is we don't get to dictate what is safe for other people, right? We can say, here are my values, here are the things that I'm trying to preserve and be a good steward of, but one of the things that I cannot do is say, I'm safe for you. I have created this safe place where you can spill all of your feelings and all of your things, and then all of a sudden someone says something that's uncomfortable, and I'm like, ooh, but you can't say that. They don't feel safe if I do that, right? And so creating a space is important, and creating a space that is aiming for safety of others is also important.
And there are general rules of thumb that one can follow to create that security for other people, right? Katara, hearing from Jet that you're not alone, that there are other people that can do this, is a way to create safety. Is to show that space can feel safe. And
he does such a good job.
I like him so much until the end.
Yeah.
Every time, even in the animated one, you're like,
he does such a good job as someone who is caring for Katara and
for
really,
the people in his group.
And yeah, he is a good. It is clear that he knows how to care for people.
Mm-hmm.
It is evident. Like, he is so good at it, and he's able to help Katara and lean into the things that she's struggling with and create a container in which she feels safe, right?
Which
and
is
then
so frustrating.
It.
It's so frustrating when he acts outside of those values.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of it, right? When he's creating community that is about being caring and living inside those values, Jet's awesome.
Yeah.
The moment he stops caring for other people,
Mm-hmm.
he's living outside of those values, and that's when we start to see things like, yeah, I'll blow up the king.
Yep.
And if other people get hurt, so be it.
Yeah.
Well, you've stopped being that caring person at that point.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting, too, because what we're talking about is we see 2 assassination attempts in this episode, right? One's going against the Fire Lord. And in a way, to me, that feels more justified.
Well, certainly it does.
Right?
Again, the oppressed versus the oppressor. And at this point, they're viewing King Boomy as
An oppressor.
an oppressor.
Yeah.
Because he's not acting
Yeah.
in the way that they want him to.
And that is, again, like, to me, when you put those 2 right next to each other, it's like one is very different than the other. But also, they're pretty similar. It's just a matter of perspective. And I think it's really important to remember, like, this is exactly my point, that if you are the type of person that is like me and you see these 2 as very different and like, no, but going after King or Lord Fire Lord Ozai is like more justifiable than going after Boomy, you should be questioning your your thought process here.
It's well, I mean, that's the nuance that comes into it. Ozai has been actively participating in the murder and killing of probably hundreds of thousands of people at this point.
Yeah.
King Booby hasn't.
Mm-hmm.
He just maybe hasn't been acting the way that you want to. And the result is different in terms that, like, lots of people are dying and people feel oppressed. And people are dying and people feel oppressed is a similar lens. And so the similarities are there and the differences are there. Mm-hmm. And we are silly to only feel like there is one or the other and that it exists in a binary. Because I think that's again, you get to the question of what's the manufactured threat and what's the real threat and how are we handling those things. Yeah. And I think Boomy is a little bit more of a manufactured threat. He is not the cause of the harm. He just may not be acting with you. And that is what is frustrating to Jet and becomes it's us against them. Yeah. And that's the danger.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. There's a few things I don't know exactly how to talk about. Specifically, some of the things that are happening in this episode are... Some of the things that are played up for humor don't land for me. And I think part of it is because there's, like... It's done for humor, but it's clearly taking up people's security and, like, taking away their safety in order for laughter. And I'm thinking of, like, in the scene where they're trying to get into the city, it seems like they throw over a cart for laughs over the on this bridge. It's like, why do you keep coming here? And then he throws the livelihood off the side of off the side of this bridge. And I think again, there's a few things like that throughout this episode where I'm like, ugh, that doesn't feel like it should, and I want to, like, I know that I was meant to laugh there, but that just seems sad. And there's this, a lot of this feels like this, callous or just blasé treatment of other people, for the illusion of safety, you know?
And what a real thing that is, right? I'm being unkind because that's what's required for my safety.
Yeah.
And there's sometimes where it's an interesting place to go. When is that true? When is that manufactured, and when is it not? Right?
Yeah.
I just keep coming back to that question. A girl getting hit on at a bar.
Yeah.
And the guy doesn't take no for the answer.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not mad at an individual for not acting out of niceties when safety is on the table.
Yeah.
Right? I've said no, get away from me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't need you to be polite in those moments.
Yeah.
I'm not expecting anyone to be polite in those moments. And then there's times where it's like I'm being honest with a family member.
Mm.
And it's okay that I was cruel in that moment because of my safety.
Yeah.
And it's like, was that cruelness needed for the honesty to hit?
Yeah.
Like, can we be compassionately honest?
Mm-hmm.
And the difference is, which I can't tell anybody, because sometimes even that scenario can be safe.
Yeah.
Can be about someone's physical and emotional safety. And so it is really tough to navigate. When is that threat so prevalent that kindness isn't necessary?
Yeah. Yeah.
However, the argument you get is, here is this government who, even though the government is oppressed,
Yeah.
they are not as oppressed as the people who are living under that government.
Exactly.
And so to sit there and say, this cart of, and I think we are supposed to think it's cabbages, though it is not.
Right.
It's
That's
not
what I
at
thought,
the.
yeah.
But when it happens, you think it's the cabbage cart. Here's this cart of food that's probably trying to be sold at market.
Yeah.
And sorry, the threat is too big. I need you to throw away all of your livelihood.
Yep.
But it's fine because it's for security.
Yeah.
Is a really tough line. That's a manufactured threat.
Like, it's just one of those things where, like, it would take an earthbender 30 seconds to, you know, move that
Move it
cart.
away.
And
Just
so, like,
to the end of the bridge.
exactly, right? It would not take long. And so there's a better way.
Yeah.
But I really want to talk about this quote that we get from Jet and go back to this moment with Katara.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote this quote down word for word because it was so good. Like, we don't have to be afraid of our pain. We just have to decide what we're going to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the things about this too is, you know, talk about pain being a threat to security, right? Emotional or physical or otherwise. Like, people don't want to experience pain, and so we do everything we can to avoid it.
Yep.
And I think this is a very wise line from Jet, but it's also a kind of a privileged line of being able to say, like, we don't have to be afraid of our pain, which, like, I agree with. And we also just have to decide what we're going to do with it, which I agree with. But also, that really dictates the amount of pain, the kind of pain, and
correct.
he is able to articulate this in the moment, and Katara is able to learn from her pain because she has so much distance from it. But at the same time, this is something super real and poignant for her that she talks about it like it's the joke of the original show, is that she talks about it so much, right? It's not really a joke, but, like, it's one of those things where
people have made it a joke, yeah.
Exactly. And I just think it's really... I think that's a really beautiful line in this context and for a lot of people, but also that not all pain is something that we have this capacity to address like this.
Correct. Because sometimes it's not pain, it's death, right?
Yeah,
like
exactly.
Emotional or physical, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, and what a context to put everything through. Everything we've even said this episode, we have to recognize that comes from our own privileges that we exist in our spheres, that we're talking from our personal perspectives about our views on all of this.
Yeah.
With the goal of hopefully learning other people's views and feelings on it.
Yeah.
to learn in community. But like even us just having the show is from a perspective of privilege.
Yeah.
And that's always worth acknowledging.
Yeah. I have one more thing. Do you have more?
I do, but I'll let you go first because mine's more of silly.
My last thing is the moment I found this really interesting with Teo and Sai, the Mechanist, and thinking about the first thing that kind of Teo, upon realizing that Aang is an airbender, is that you're our new secret weapon. You can bomb the Fire Nation. And like the first thing he sees in an airbender is Aang as a weapon. And you know, it's not that this is a child that's 12 years old, right, or 112, whatever way you see it, but like, is this why he wants to fly? Is this why he's been like in the air and do like? It's just like this throws a whole new light on this character that is really interesting. That wow, the first thing you see in a child who can airbend is a weapon, and I thought that just really speaks to the state of mind that Teo is in as also a child who is struggling with these regular bombings in the city, and this, you know, he's living in a traumatic situation, right? Like, talk about some serious trauma here. He's being bombed every other moment. And so, yeah, I just thought that was a really interesting thing to see Aang as a weapon. And I'm curious what your thoughts were on that.
I think it kind of goes back to we behave based off of the tools that we have. And Teo's grown up seeing bombs and weapons being made.
Yep.
So those are the tools that he feels like, and if other people are engaging in that, why can't I engage in it that way?
Yeah.
But if it's the only thing we know, if that's the only way we know to create security,
that's such a good point.
Then that's what we're going to lean into.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
So the goal is to learn other ways to form that security. Just like checking, I think, and that's probably the answer to the question I've been asking so long, is like we have to learn. We have to learn and act based off of other perspectives of what's actually real and what's actually unsafe. I think of so many times I talk to folks who have thoughts on the city that I live in, which is in the Triangle area, North Carolina.
Yep.
And so there's a viewpoint that one of those cities has been just the most dangerous place to be in North Carolina.
Oh, yeah.
And so, I think
10 in the
top
nation
10 in the nation of terrible places to live. And I have, like, everyone I talk to who actually lives there is like,
it's great. I love
it's the best place. I would never live anywhere else. And so I think that's the interesting concept, right? Like, you have to go outside of your purview to like learn these things of like what is actually unsafe, what is real, the lack of safety really look like, and so you have to learn that, you have to experience those things, and you have to have those conversations and hear from others, and not just sit in your one area and make that view. And so you act with the tools that you have and the knowledge that you have, and so you have to go get more knowledge and more tools.
Well, and I mean, what that reminds me of is Andre Henry's work, who was a guest on our third season, covering the finale, I think, of the OG ATLA, and we were talking about nonviolent resistance.
Yep.
And the idea is that people are like, no, war is the answer, it's the only way. When if you do the research on nonviolent resistance, it's very effective. And it's
not, it doesn't mean peace, right? It doesn't mean harmony. It doesn't mean that it's like, no, it's nonviolent doesn't mean peaceful. It's disruptive.
Yes. Exactly. And so doing the research on that is this is an effective means of resistance. Oh, this is an alternative to blowing people up, right? And so thinking about just using other options and learning about them and realizing, there's actually research behind this is something that I think is really important. So I recommend checking out Andre's work if you are curious about that.
Absolutely. My final moment is how secure do you have to be as a Fire Nation assassin to be the only one in the entire city
wearing a red cloak? I knew you were going there as soon as you started.
That's a Fire Nation spy. How can you tell?
Was it the firebending that you saw?
And the fact that he's just like glowing red cloak in the city. There's spies everywhere. You don't say.
You pan out and zoom out, and it's the only red cloak in the entire area.
Who would have thought?
Oh my goodness! Oh gosh, yeah, that's funny. Interesting choice.
I was like, that's a man who feels secure with the work that they're doing.
Yeah, if that's the generous assumption, is that this guy is just a really secure.
He's so good at being a spy that he says, I'm going to go out and wear a red cloak.
Psychology.
Especially after we see, like, oh, you're wearing blue clothes and yellow clothes.
Oh, that
so, like, you're probably not from here.
Yeah.
And so they have to put on earthbender clothes. So the fact that this person is just walking around the city and being like,
yeah.
Don't look at me.
Oh, man.
It's wild.
That is a funny moment.
All right, we'll take a quick break, and then we'll be right back with our Twee and Law and our devotion. And so stick around.
Woohoo. We're back, and we are excited to talk about some lovely Twee and Law moments.
Twee and
things
Law.
we like, things we don't like, things that pulled us in, and things that pushed us away. Always, again, aiming for balance. So, thinking about this gives us a chance to talk about things that we don't normally talk about in the discussion, which is things that are outside of the story, potentially, like the music or the scenery or the acting choices and things along those lines that give us a chance to lean more into direction and writing. And so this, doesn't mean we're always going to talk about that, but this is our moment to talk about that if it comes up. So Sunshine, where do you want to start? Push you away, pulls you in, where do you want to go?
Yeah, one of the things I really enjoyed about this episode is the merging of several plot lines throughout the show.
I thought that was so
that
cool.
was creatively done. I was not expecting to see Teo and the Mechanist
in
Omashu and Jet popping up so early on,
and it was done so well. Like they wove them together. I thought it was really well done.
And I think so. Like the assassination attempt on Boomy is a new thing that makes more sense than flooding the town in the setting, and having the Mechanist giving secrets in Omashu out where we have now know there may be spies versus like being at this air temple secluded makes way more sense of him trying to live there in this context. So I think that worked.
Yeah.
I missed the idea of Aang having to rumble with like what my temple was.
Yeah.
To like what
we don't get that,
to like
right?
what can it be? Maybe they'll still do a version of that. Who knows? But that was a decision that I was like, hey, I'm kind of here for this, and what a way to kind of merge these plot lines into that, and I think that worked out really well. Some of it still comes off as a little like, if I really wonder what it is like to watch this show if you have never watched the other ones, because like, does meeting the Duke and meeting Smellerby and Longshot, are you excited for those characters? Do you like, or did that come off as like,
do you want to see more of them?
Or does it come off as like, it's weird? Is it weird to introduce them like that? If, with the exception of you're just trying to like give the fans a like, hey, thanks, Longshot, like as a that is Longshot. Well, I don't know. So, there's still moments where the writing seems a little chunky to me on like dialogue.
Yeah, is it like fan service or is it something that's actually serving the plot line? And so there's a few things that are included that are like, okay, this seems like it's just fan service rather than actually doing something.
The whole my cabbages thing, like how does that
Yeah.
play for someone who doesn't have that context?
Yeah, just I mean exactly right. And do we get the repetition of that in future episodes / seasons? Will be a major kind of determining factor, I guess, for that. But yeah, the other thing that I really like is I really thought Omashu was gorgeous. I thought the scenery of Omashu, like there's like 2 good shots of where there's a pan of Omashu where I'm like, that's cool. That looks neat. This long bridge with like the misty next to it, and then you see the whole city. I just thought that was a really cool image. So I think that Omashu was done really well. So I thought that was super neat. I also thought the casting for Freedom Fighters was pretty cool also. I thought
Seemed
that
to
was
be,
done
yeah.
really well. Yeah. Maybe Jet aside, but
even I think like I thought he worked
yeah.
as Jet. I've been vibing with the acting performances of Zuko a good bit. But I will say that that's probably one of the things that like some of it just doesn't feel natural. Like the dialogue feels like clunky.
Mm-hmm.
And even some of the line delivery from like Iroh at one point, there's the moment where he tells Zuko to like, don't firebend because it'll give you away. And that delivery just felt very like clunky and misplaced.
Yeah. And it's hard to tell, right? Like what the reasoning behind that is.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, it's, I don't know. But yeah, I think that's one of the things that kind of pushed me away was just thinking about, generally speaking, line delivery and placement and the timing. There's just a few things that make me go like, I don't know how I feel about that.
Yeah.
So just things that pull me out of the viewing process, so to speak, or push me away, whichever suits you. Anything else for in or out?
No.
Cool.
No.
All right.
Not this episode.
Yeah. Well, this is the episode we're talking about. So
that's right.
Yeah.
No, I feel good about it.
All right. Moving on then.
Next episode, I've got feelings.
Don't we? Don't we always have feelings? All right. So let's talk about our devotion. And again, for those of us who are joining, awkwardly for this random episode, we talk about a devotion, and that devotion is essentially setting an intention through a element of the avatar cycle, and this element is fire.
Yeah.
Because we want to master the elements as we watch the show. And so this episode is fire, and we're going to pair that with our lens of security. So when we talk about fire and we talk about security, it seems like an easy layup here. But I'm curious, where are you going in terms of setting an intention for the week?
I immediately went to fire pit in my head when thinking about this. There's a reason to that. There's a barrier that gets put up for the safety of others, like a literal barrier to protect others from the fire that is there.
Yep.
It has to be a certain distance away from, like, you've got to create enough of a barrier so that it's not getting elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
It has to be big enough to maintain the fire that you've built.
Yep, high enough so that things, if they fall,
but if things that fall, they don't fall over. They don't fall into places that can burn. So you got to build a barrier. But if you build that barrier so far out that, one, you don't feel the fire anymore.
You gotta really hone that line.
Or two, the barrier is so far away from the flames that it actually doesn't help.
Doesn't do
anything on the outside of the barrier, and actually can cause space for things to burn all inside of the barrier.
Yeah.
Like the barrier is incorrect.
Yeah.
It's wrong, and it is not serving the purpose that it needs to.
That's such a good thought. I like that.
And so the idea that, like, you're either one have to be, if the goal is for me to be on the outside of the barrier to protect me from the fire, and it's so far away that I can't feel the fire anymore, then it's not doing what it's supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
And it's just there to be there, to say that it is there. Or it's so close and I'm so close, or inside of the barrier, that I can't be protected from it. And so
and I'm getting burnt.
Now I'm getting burnt because the barrier's not where it needs to be. And so I think it's finding where's the right place to put those barriers, and where is the barrier not needed. I also don't need 5 barriers on the outside of that fire.
Yeah. What's overkill?
So like in the reality is, if I want to feel the warmth of that fire, if I want to feel the safety of that fire, if I want the fire to be useful in cooking or heating or whatever it needs to be doing, the barrier has to be appropriately placed.
Yeah.
And so it's looking for where are those spots in my life that have I created boundaries in between me and others as a barrier that is keeping the actual connection piece from happening.
Yeah.
And where do I need to knock those things down? But then recognizing, like, are there places where I need to put the barrier up because people have over access, or I'm giving over access to people and my safety is not there.
It reminds me of parenting when you have like a little kid who I want them to learn the lesson of if you do this, then you're going to fall. But then there's also like the parents who bubble wrap their children and never let them fall. And it's like, where's the line, right? How do I allow them to learn while also letting them make mistakes, while also protecting them from like, oh no, when you touch the stove, you're going to feel burned. Don't let them touch the stove, right?
But if you don't show them how to use a stove,
Exactly,
they will never
cook.
learn. So like,
yeah, that's a good. I like that. That's a good one. And so, if you, what's the headline here in terms of putting it into an intention for the week?
Focusing on where I need to place appropriate boundaries.
Yeah.
And being and really paying attention to where maybe boundaries have been set, or past boundaries have been set that could be moved
or adjusted. Yeah.
Because I think that's the other thing about boundaries that sometimes we forget is, like, you are allowed to move your boundaries when you are ready.
Yeah.
Sometimes not.
And that doesn't mean you're any less or more than you were before.
Correct.
Right?
Because there's a difference in saying, here's a boundary, and then letting people cross that boundary is like, that's not a boundary set.
Yeah.
It is okay for you to set a boundary, hold people to it, and then decide later that boundary can be changed when you're ready to change it.
And it's more negotiable based off who you're talking to,
Correct.
Right? And so thinking about all of the context that comes with that.
Well, there's certain things to be said, like I really try to protect my weekend times.
Yeah.
Because capitalism is
the worst.
a joy suck for me. And so I really try to protect my weekend times.
Yep.
There are times where family or people that I care about will ask for that time for a thing, and I'm okay then giving that time in that space because of the relationship, even if sometimes I don't want to. That's my time, right?
Yep.
Like, but sometimes I'm willing to give it.
Yeah.
And I don't view that as a boundary cross. That is me choosing when I'm willing to give my time.
Well, and
but it's typically not for work, right? Like,
that's
it's typically
often what
like
boundaries should be.
Right.
Is it's not you controlling other people; it's you setting a line for yourself.
Right.
Right. Boundaries are meant for you to determine when you act, not to determine what others should do. Right.
But when people have had access to that time from me,
yes,
and then I'm deciding when I don't do or don't, if I'm taking that back, it feels like they are losing something.
Yes.
So it's tough.
Yeah.
But that's where I want to evaluate this week.
That's so good. The layup for me was also with a fire pit. And so one of the things that I'm thinking about is we've talked about the beauty of campfires, just generally speaking, but there's something magical that happens around a campfire.
Mm-hmm.
And often what happens is you're sitting around a campfire with the people you care about, your loved ones, your friends, and you're enjoying each other's company. You're telling stories, you're cracking jokes, you're experiencing what, like, to me, life feels like. This is the good, the marrow
it's like
of
the
bones,
goal, kind of.
right? Yeah, this is like, dang, if I could just do this all the time, that would be a win. And that is the kind of like security blanket that I want to bring to other contexts.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to figure out, how do we capture the essence of what brings that? And there's a lot of components around that. There's something like, there's an evolutionary biological response to a campfire, because this is how we've been telling stories and living our lives for thousands of years, is around a campfire. And so I think there's truly something biological in terms of our response, but I think there's something biological in our response to helping people feel safe around us when we tell them certain things, and when we say certain things, and when we have physical contact and like touch people on the shoulder in a very consentful way, but like doing the beauty of that and capturing that. And so I think as I go into these next couple of weeks, I'm going into a miserable amount of schoolwork over the next 2 weeks, but then I'm done and I get to really kind of reframe my life because I'm applying to jobs. I get to kind of click the reset button. And so as I kind of go into this, I'm thinking more long-term than this week. I'm thinking about how do I reimagine my life with this new scenario and plan intentionally around creating more times where I can build that space. How do I literally have more campfire time in my life and make sure I intentionally build it? Similar to the way you protect your weekends, how do I build in that protected time for that experience more often is what I'm thinking about.
I love that.
Thanks.
Yeah. Let's jump in to our gratitude, because we always want to be grateful, and we like to show gratitude towards a character for their actions. So who do you have?
Yeah. For me, believe it or not, folks, I am grateful for Jet.
Jet.
Yeah, I'm a big fan.
You ever heard that song before?
No. Maybe?
It's from Wings.
No. But moral of the story is, I think that Jet does a lot of things really well. Like, he is inviting, he's welcoming, he's caring, he's generous until the end. And so, like, I think that all of those things are... It's hard to separate, like, when people do good things for bad reasons, they're still doing good things. And, you know, even though I think Jet has a really harmful framework for the reason he's doing some of these things, I also think that he's doing good things. And so I'm grateful for that, even if he's potentially doing it as a means of, like, luring Katara into something that she's not actually interested in.
No. So Jet.
Yeah. What about you?
Sokka.
Sokka's a dude.
I think
Big fan.
what I really appreciate about this episode is just the curiosity. He approaches things with curiosity. Oh, this is this, and this could be this, and what if we made this? And we see that a little bit in this episode.
Yeah.
And I just appreciate that curiosity. Oh, they did the spring things. I should have used that at home. And I think that's kind of exactly what we are talking about. You know what I mean? Is this idea around openness to other ways of thought. And I think he just highlights that. Even in a very short period, this episode, we see that. Yeah. And I am greatly appreciative of it.
Yeah. I also want to just mention that, like, not a lot of women in this episode.
No. Azula.
Yeah.
Ty Lee may show up.
Yep. And then Katara.
And then Katara.
And that's it.
That's about
it. I guess honorable mention to the woman who interrupts Zuko and Aang.
Who just, like, in the fight, just, like, stop hitting the kid!
Stop hitting this child! And, like, takes on Zuko with no remorse. And it's just... so big shout out to that lovely unnamed character. Big fan of you.
Well done, you.
Yeah.
We love when people stand up for what is right.
Absolutely. Well, that's another episode.
Another episode in the books.
Omashu through a lens of security, and with all of our loving listener friends. That's you.
That's right. Thank y'all so much for being a part of our community, and thank you for listening. I'm Sunshine.
And I'm Ben.
And we'll see you next week.
Goodbye.